August 9th. It is, this is for Dean Massara's Preparing for Lives in the Law project. This is Elizabeth Townsend interviewing Pat Green. Let's start with, why did you go to law school, and was it what you expected when you got there?
I went to law school because it's something I always wanted to do. As a child in elementary school, I even remember I wanted to go to law school. As I mentioned to someone recently, I considered Perry Mason my mentor for what that's worth, though I never wanted to practice criminal law. And law has been everything I've expected to be and more, and law school was a joy. I think a lot of that, though, had to do with the fact that I went back to law school after having been in the workforce for almost 20 years, and law school was like vacation, it was a break. And I enjoyed it, and I went into it with the idea that I was going to enjoy it, and the fact that after waiting all those years, I finally made it, made me that more determined to succeed. So.
Okay, let me ask you some questions.
Sure.
Tell me more about wanting to be a lawyer in elementary school. What was your vision of what a lawyer would do, and is it what you do? I mean, does it match up?
Well, again, I didn't have any real life characters to look at, but I always liked, like I said, I liked watching Perry Mason. I liked what I saw him doing. Just the idea of arguing a point, and, of course, he always got the people to confess. That's not really what I do in practicing family law. And then in high school, I kind of took it to another step. They had what was called an ombudsman program in my high school, where students went through a training course, and then they were assigned to assist other students who had problems, disciplinary problems. We'd intervene and go with them to meet with the principal, that sort of thing. So from doing that, that just kind of increased my vision. Then I went to college, and that was bomb.
Why?
Oh gosh, I had so much fun in college, and didn't have a good GPA, and just was not law school material. So I left there and decided that I'd get a job that would put me in the legal profession. And I became a legal secretary a year after I graduated from college, and did that until entering law school. So.
And what made you decide to go back to law school?
My employer told me that I had reached the top of my salary range, and it was very unlikely that I would get any significant increases. I said, you know what? I think it's about that time to move on. So.
And how hard was it was it scary applying to law school? Did you apply all over the place, or did you apply here?
I pretty much limited myself to the West Coast. I was living in Los Angeles at the time, so I did the usual there, UCLA, some of the smaller schools, and Arizona, I think, is actually the only school that I applied to outside of California. So.
And was Arizona what you expected when you got here? Did you have any idea what you were getting into?
I came to visit before I made up my mind. Well, once I received the acceptance, I decided to visit first. And yeah, it has been, actually. It's been a great experience, and I like Tucson.
I think we'll come back to it, but I think it would be great to talk about sort of your legal secretary sort of advice to sort of how you treat your secretary and how you use secretaries. I don't know if you want to do that now or do it in a little bit.
Well, having been a legal secretary, it makes me more appreciative of what my secretary has to put up with. And at the same time, I think the load that I place on her is less because, I'm a typist first and foremost, so I do most of my work. But from my understanding of talking with people who I know who are still legal secretaries back in California anyway, most of the new attorneys are coming in, with their laptops at their desk and all that, so secretaries are doing a lot less of the initial typing anyway.
When you're a summer associate or fresh out law student, what advice can you give them in terms of how to use their secretary and how to treat their secretary and sort of what the role of their legal secretary is? My mom's a legal secretary too, so we've had lots of conversations about this.
I mean, I think, generally, to be cliche, you start with the golden rule. You treat people the way you would want to be treated. But you just the thing, even having been a legal secretary, I think the most difficult part for me to remember is that my secretary still knows more than I do. You know, even though I had all those experiences, all those years of experience, there's still some things that she knows that I don't. And especially when it deals with, you know, well, how many copies do you file and where to file, and, you know, remembering, for example, with disclosure statements that I got to put a notice, and I mean, just, you know, little stuff like that, and to show respect for the fact that they do have that knowledge. Of course, unless you don't have an experienced secretary, then, you know, you're both learning together. But I think most law firms try not to put new secretaries with new attorneys.
So, okay, so I have a secretary and I know nothing. And I know she or he knows tons.
Okay.
What do I do? I mean, I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
And she scares me. I mean, she may be very nice, but I think she's going to know that I know nothing. So how do you start out with that relationship to make it a strong relationship? And how much can I depend on her in terms of helping me figure out stuff? Because it seems like she might get mad if she has, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that's too hard.
I guess it kind of depends on the personalities. The secretary that I'm working with, and actually my experience working at the Court of Appeals with my secretary, I mean, it's never been an issue. You know, they've just always been really nice people, willing to help, and when they say they want to help, they mean it. So I haven't found that to be a problem. Even though I've heard, you know, differently or even observed differently.
What about them? Okay, my mom has told me many stories over the years. What are the things that people shouldn't be giving their secretaries or shouldn't be making them do? I mean, if you could have been like telling young lawyers or young to-be lawyers now as a lawyer, as a legal secretary, you're in a very unique position in a great way.
Yes.
What shouldn't they be doing? Like, tell them some don'ts if you have any ideas.
Well, I mean, of course, the personal stuff, but at the same time, sometimes you can.
Yeah.
You know, I was trying to think of a sample. I can't think of anything right offhand. Well, no, I had a situation, and I consider this personal, but if you ask nicely enough, I was in Phoenix for the State Bar Convention, and my funds got a little tight. And generally, you get reimbursed for your expenses when you return. But since my funds got a little tight, I called my secretary and said, you know what, I really need some money now. So would you mind getting an advance for me on the expenses that I expect to turn in? And then I needed either, you know, if you could make, what did I ask her to do? I was trying not to ask her to go put it in the bank for me, but she volunteered. So I appreciated that. And I consider that personal, but I think if you phrase it in the right way and, you know, are real humble and ask for it correctly,
Because it's
that
an
kind of stuff
emergency
you can
and
get done, right?
yeah. What about the relationship with the people that you work with paralegals and file clerks and legal secretaries in terms of, I don't know, I mean, do you have a particular philosophy? I mean, is it still the golden rule of sort of, I mean, I guess everybody's different, but...
I think so. I mean, you know, I think the main problem that might arise is when you have attorneys, be they new or old, who treat secretaries and other employees as though they're somehow real low on the totem pole and I'm so much better than you. And as long as you remember you're all equal as people, and the fact that you have this title of attorney and, you know, they have the title of secretary doesn't really give you any greater standing than them.
Can you be friends, and do you have to, I mean, really that, I shouldn't say that. Anyway, it's too personal, but sometimes there's this sort of culture in law firms where you can only be friends with the people that are like attorneys, or do you think that there should be,
It depends on the law firm. I think you have to pick up on, like you said, the culture of the law firm, and if that's the way the firm operates, then, you know, you govern yourself accordingly. The firm that I work at presently, it's really not a big deal. I went shopping with my secretary yesterday. Had no business shopping, but I did. And, you know, Secretary's Day or other occasions, you know, we're all going out together. So it's not a big deal. But on the other hand, when I was a legal secretary, I worked in offices where, that was just not done.
Right.
So you just have to kind of pick up on the culture and go from there. And it's not to say that that prevents you, though, from cultivating a friendship just outside of the office.
Mm-hmm. That was the other question. Let's say you work in a place that's kind of nasty and like, they have sort of super hierarchy and like it's like, but you don't want to be that kind of person. Do you think it's okay to not follow the, do you know what I mean? Like, can you be nice even if it's a culture that's not nice? Does that make sense? I mean, I know it's kind of a dumb question, but.
I think you have to be. You have to be yourself.
Yeah.
And if it makes you really uncomfortable, or the people that you work with make you really uncomfortable, then perhaps you need to find a different job.
All right. Okay, totally lost it. Litigation. What do you do in litigation? What kind of litigation do you do?
Well, I practice domestic family law. So I do divorce, custody, support, paternity, fun stuff. And a large part of my practice is litigation, but it's not what people traditionally think of as litigation. At this point, even though I've been practicing for 3 years, I have not had a full-blown trial. On the other hand, I tend to be in court an average of twice a week on what's called order to show cause hearings. So they're shorter hearings, but it's still going through the same motions as you would in a trial.
So, give us a typical day. Is there a typical day in what you do? Particularly people who are interested in family law and that kind of thing.
Meeting with clients, I'd say 10% of my day, if I had to average it out, is in meeting with clients. Probably 50% is reviewing or drafting documents. Another 30 on the telephone. And what's that leave me? 50, 30, 80, 90, 10% going to court. So it's probably a little more time in court than that, but that's pretty close. So most of my time is doing the writing and the drafting the documents. The other large block is the telephone. Clients calling all the time.
Like, tell me why do they call?
And then they get their bills and they look and they say, "I didn't know you were going to charge me for talking to you. I'm on the phone with you a whole hour." You don't expect me to bill for the time, but when we talk about clients. Anyway, no, they call and they just, they want to complain. He's not doing this, she's not doing that, she won't give me, they won't pick up the children, they won't bring back the children.
So it's like, how do you deal with all that? That just seems like, oh my goodness, like, I mean, all problems are that way, but it's just like,
I'm ready to go back to school to get a counseling degree.
Really?
But then I don't know if I should, because then I might get too serious about it. Right now, I take the counseling part as kind of fun, I look at it and I just kind of go from real life experience. And my clients seem to appreciate that. I mean, the fact of the matter is I've been divorced twice myself. I'm a single parent presently. Went through law school as a single parent. Have had issues regarding child support. As a matter of fact, I tell them, I haven't gotten child support in 10 years as of this year. And they seem to appreciate the fact that because of those experiences, I can relate to what they're going through. And that's either, from a father's standpoint or a mother's standpoint.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
So
tell
my
me,
counseling to them kind of goes more from life experience.
Mm-hmm. So, Dean Massara loves counseling stories. She loves stories about ways to figure out problems, or that weren't necessarily legal, or maybe when you figured out a creative solution, or maybe later you figured out a better way to have handled it, or sort of strategies that students wouldn't necessarily, that they wouldn't get the counseling part of sort of dealing with clients as opposed to just the law.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
Nothing that pops immediately into mind, but I do know, I mean, sometimes, I've sat in conference room with a client and then they leave and I go out and I just look at my secretary and I say, damn, I'm good at this. It's like,
So tell me,
but I
you
can't
have to
think of
brag.
anything
This is a time to
exactly.
brag. So.
Well, yeah, but I can't think of any specific instances. I mean, I guess, one that would come to mind is a client who was she was just devastated because her husband was being so mean to her. And at the same time, she's saying, but I don't want to get a divorce and the children and this, that, and the other. And she's one who I just shared my personal story with. I told her, I said, look, I was married to someone who was physically and emotionally abusive, and her husband wasn't so much physically, even though there had been at least one physical altercation that she described. And you sit and you look at the fact, yes, you have two. She had twins, 2 children. I had 3 at the time, who love their daddy. And they're going to look at you all the time and say, Mommy, I want you and Daddy to be together. But you have to make a decision as to what's in your best interest. And, I relayed to her, I said, the fact that he treats you this way and the children are observing it impacts them. And I told her how, again, going back to the fact that my husband had been physically abusive and my children had witnessed it. Mm-hmm. And once, when my daughter was about 6 years old, she looked at me and she said, Mommy, I want you and Daddy to be together and, he won't hit you anymore. And then within the past 6 months or so, she said to me, I don't remember Daddy ever hitting you. And I looked at her and I was like, how could you say that? And then after I said that to her,
how old is she
she's 18, she'll be 19 September.
Mm-hmm.
But after I said that to her, I thought to myself and reminded myself, that's very good, because that means you've served your purpose, because by leaving him, they don't have that memory and they don't have that history in their minds to go through, and that, therefore getting a divorce was a good thing.
We've been talking to a lot of people about this. Do you ever feel like, in particular with family law, that you get sucked into problems that aren't the problems that they've come to you for? Is there a sense that you're so intimately connected with your clients' lives that do you feel like you have to keep boundaries up, or is it, someone else said, well, you can, because these are people's lives and they're, do you know what I mean, like what that balance, relationship with clients kind of thing?
I've had to force myself to step back sometimes. On the other hand, I know I have done things that other attorneys in my firm would not do. For example, I had a paternity case where the judge ordered that my client remain in the state. She wanted to go to California to be with her parents, and he had ordered that she remain in the state pending further order. And this was on Tuesday or Wednesday that he had, issued the original order. Then I find out on Friday afternoon that he faxed an order to me, like after 5 o'clock, saying that she could go to California until the time of the next hearing. And in the meantime, her parents had already left. They had put her in a hotel, and here I am with this order, and I know she wants to go home. So I called and let them know that I had it, and they're, running around talking about, well, how can we get her to the airport and all this. And I volunteer my services to take her to the airport. So, and I know there are attorneys, most of the attorneys in my office would not have done that. So sometimes because they just don't see it as something that they should do, But she was 19 or 20. She's a young girl, and they had left her and her younger brother here as well. And I just kind of like, well, it's not going to hurt me to do it. Even though they could have gotten a shuttle or a taxi or whatever, but it was really no big deal. So.
But probably a big deal to them, because it was a sense of kindness that they weren't alone in the world.
Yeah, but at the same time, I no longer represent them and that's one of the things when you talk about client issues, and one of the things that I have found is that clients take out on you rulings that are not in their favor or bad treatment that they receive from other attorneys, the attorney on the other side. So.
Give me an example.
Well, in this particular case, I mean, I thought we put on an excellent case. It was, there were some issues where, to me, it was obvious that if you look at the statute and apply it strictly, my client should have been allowed to go to California, at least temporarily, while these proceedings were pending, and, set up some visitation for the father. And the judge issued a ruling which, to me, contradicted itself. At one point he said, my goal, pursuant to the law, is to make sure that both parents have frequent and meaningful and equal, I think he even used, contact with the child. This is a 6-month-old baby, I think it was at the time. And then he goes on to say, so, if mom stays in Arizona, the parties will essentially alternate visitation, week on, week off, something like that, he said, or 2 weeks to each. I don't remember exactly. But if she goes to California, dad gets the child for 3 out of every 4 weeks.
So she's punished.
Yes.
By going to California.
Yeah. So, and, she was devastated. And again, she was young, so her parents were kind of backing her, and, they were upset. And I ended up losing a client because of the judge's ruling. I don't think it was anything that I did, and I think the judge was wrong in his ruling. Well, not wrong, but he ignored the law. And everybody I talked to agreed, be an attorney, whatever. But, so, in those cases, and then I had another client who was in the process of getting another attorney, and some people look for attorneys who are kind of bulldogs, real aggressive, argumentative,
right.
And I'm not that kind of person. And I had this case where the attorney on the other side was, and my client felt that she was getting beat up on, on the 2 occasions that we had gone into court, even though we got really favorable rulings from the judge. And, I kept telling her, look, the judge is not impressed by their tactics at all. But she just felt, she wanted somebody more aggressive. I said, fine, but that's not my style, and I'm not going to let you or anybody else make it my style. Mm-hmm. And one of the other things I tell my clients is, I had one person who never became my client because he came in and we did an interview, and he was like, I just want to make her pay. Whatever I can do, I want to just make her pay. So I don't do revenge. That's all to it. I can help you within the bounds of the law, but I don't do revenge.
Do you see people who do? Do you come across people on the other side that do revenge? Do you think, or is it not as common as, like,
I don't know if
TV
they
would have
think
us
they're
speak?
doing revenge, but just attorneys have different styles, and some of them, I think divorce is hard enough on the parties, and especially when there are children involved, I think it's really important to try to go through the divorce and allow the parties some sense of friendship. Mm-hmm. And, when you have an attorney who's beating up on the spouse on your behalf, and they're sitting there saying, why is he letting this person do this to me? Or why is she letting this person do this to me? And it tends to drive the parties that much further apart, and I don't think that should be in divorce.
What do you
So
do
I
when
don't
you
know
have
if it's
some,
revenge.
Right, but what do you do when someone is doing that on the other side? How do you combat that? How do you combat a bulldog? I mean...
Well, so far I've only run into it twice. And, the one time I just described, my client decided she wanted someone else. Mm-hmm. And I said, that's fine. And the other occasion, actually, my client ended up with another attorney, but for a different reason. So I haven't really had to combat it. And it's a question I'm struggling with, actually, because I'm to the point now where I feel this first attorney, who's a female and a graduate of this law school, I almost feel like if I get a case and she shows up on the other side, I don't want to handle it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's fair to my clients. Mm-hmm. But then I spoke with another attorney in my office, and her statement was, well, it is fair because you can't do your best work
right.
when you're up against someone like that.
Particularly in a small town like this where you get a lot of people, and you get the same people.
Right.
So. It's really interesting. Because you shouldn't have to change your tactic. You know, bulldogs shouldn't win because they're bulldogs. Yet
Right.
you say the judges. I mean,
No,
it's a
they
funny
weren't
thing,
winning.
you know.
They weren't winning, but my client just felt,
It's just the perception that they're
Right.
winning.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, what about when judges make bad decisions? I mean, how do you deal with that, and how do you? I mean, there's nothing what can you do about it, or how do you cope with it?
Yeah, unfortunately, what I found in family law is that when judges make bad decisions, the clients tend to get stuck with them because usually they can't afford to challenge the judge's decision, be it through even a simple motion for consideration or an appeal. You know, I mean, there are some things I think, and I have filed motions for reconsideration, even though I knew I wouldn't get paid for the work, simply because there are just some things that need to be corrected. But, you know, like the one decision that I referenced where, you know, he said 3 weeks if she goes to California. You know, I thought that was just, you know, we should be in the Court of Appeals, special action, whatever. But Kai said, you know, didn't have the money. So, and it was just a temporary order. I mean, even though temporary orders, the thing you have to remember too, in family law, when you first go into court, the court issues what's called temporary orders. And they are just orders that are based on preliminary information with the understanding that, okay, you're going to go out and do discovery, you're going to go out and try to work things out, you're going to go to mediation, you're going to get, you know, a custody evaluation if necessary, and then come back, and if you have to go through a trial, if you haven't resolved the issues on your own, then we'll make what are more final orders. So, you know, each of these cases that I've just described, we were at the temporary orders phase. So the other thing is, you know, when you think about, well, going through all that effort, is that, okay, so I spend $5,000 going up on appeal and I might get this change, but it's still just a temporary order, and in the long run, it may be something completely different anyway.
When you say lose a client, do they pay you before they go, or do you have?
Surely you just. It varies. It varies. Actually, the paternity case, you know, they did pay, so that was okay. But that's a completely different story, getting paid and billing and billable hours.
Tell us a little bit about that story.
You know, billable hours is one thing. I wish we could eliminate them completely. But right now, we haven't managed to come up with a better way to do it. I know some people do the flat fee thing, and every once in a while I'll do a flat fee. But the thing that scares me about flat fees, if you look a client in the face and say, okay, it's going to cost you $10,000, plain and simple.
It may not be plain or simple, right?
You know? So, you know, at least if they're paying a little bit at a time, and then in the end it comes up to $10,000, you know, they haven't been hit all at one time. But a lot of clients just don't pay. You know, they don't. And I don't know what to do about that. You know, I'm thinking, I've been thinking about how to compose a letter, and, you know, just by example, you know, yeah, I've got children to feed too. And how would you feel if you went to work, you know, for a whole month for your employer, and at the end of it they didn't give you a paycheck? Which is essentially what they did.
What do you mean by that? Which is the last comment. You mean in terms of if your client doesn't pay? I'm confused. Say it again.
No, I mean,
you're saying that for the client to understand that what they do has repercussions on how your life, how it affects your life, and that they don't get that.
Yeah. Well, at least it seems to, or they don't care.
Right.
Combination of both. You know. So, and I mean, some of them actually just don't have the money, but I know, you know, I don't know, but I've heard of cases where, I mean, there are clients people who have money, you know, get a good result. They just don't pay.
So why don't lawyers make them pay up front? Do they try?
Well, you try to, and see, and that's still where I'm going, you know, when I talked about the flat fee. I mean, if you say $10,000 up front, they're probably not going to retain you. So generally, I kind of work my retainers depending on whether or not there's going to be a custody battle. I mean, if I'm talking to someone and they tell me, look, I want custody, I don't care what, and these are the circumstances, and what I hear is there's going to be a really big fight over children,
Mm-hmm.
I asked for $5,000. And when I first started working, I couldn't even roll it off my tongue. I was like, okay. And now it comes out so easily because I've gotten burned so many times.
Uh-huh.
And
when do you ask them in the meeting when you first get there? Do you ask them? Do you let them know how much it is at the end, or
no,
how do you?
The way our office works is depending on what the client wants to hear in the initial telephone conversation. I let them know that my consultation fee is $150, which is the same as my hourly rate, and then I may say, depending on, based on what you've described to me, this is what a retainer would be. Or I may say, well, let me look at everything because you've described a lot of stuff and you've got documents and all this. I need to look at all that stuff so I have more information before I determine what the retainer would be. And usually when they come into the office, we do 1-hour consultations, which every once in a while goes over. And at the end of the consultation, I'll let them know what the retainer will be.
And then you get the retainer and you start working, and then when do you take the money out of the retainer, and then once that money's out, what is that? For somebody who doesn't know what a retainer, some people. Yeah,
our structure for the retainer, and actually you're talking about taking stuff out, we might want to delete the actual amounts that I'm talking about. But,
Okay.
Our structure for the retainer is that it's essentially a prepayment of fees and costs, and it's put into a trust account, and we use that to pay as we go along. And usually if we're getting to the point where the retainer balance is really low, I send out letters saying, it looks like the case is going to go a lot longer, please send more money. And they call me back and say, I really don't have more money to spend to send you, can I just pay as I go along? Sometimes I say yes. Rarely have I said no and just withdrawn from the case because somebody can't pay.
Why?
Which, well, I call myself a bleeding heart.
Do you think other people would do the same thing? Is that just part of being a lawyer? Is that there's just some people
generally,
that aren't
I think it depends on the attorney, though. I have not yet withdrawn from a case simply over money. And I don't think I would.
Have you withdrawn over other reasons?
Yeah. When clients don't return your calls, when they're not taking your advice. I worked for probably a good 8 months before I realized that I could fire clients. It was the happiest day.
That's the happiest day.
I had this client that she wasn't returning my calls. I tell her things, and she wasn't taking my advice, and I was just like, what am I supposed to do? And when the senior partners told me, you can withdraw from representation, I said, you mean I can fire? And he said yes. And since then, it's such a sense of relief, that once you're in that relationship, the client doesn't have to stay in a relationship,
right.
But I didn't realize that I didn't have to stay in it. So, criminal law, that's a completely different thing. It's civil, so it's really liberating. But I had so many write-offs, and the thing that I look at, and the clients I don't think really appreciate one way or the other, is that it really does impact my life. No, the hourly rate they pay doesn't go directly into my pocket. But at the same time, when it comes time for my review, they're looking at what my receivables are. They're looking at whether or not I took in enough money during the year to cover the expenses associated with my working there. So it impacts my salary.
So what do you do about that? It seems like a very frustrating place to be. You're working really hard, and then do you know what I mean? Like somebody else's actions are impinging on.
It's really not much, You keep sending them letters and hope they'll pay. And then I have some clients who I know don't have the money, and they may owe me a few $1,000s, and I say, you know what, if you send me $20 a month, I'll be happy. You know, just show me a good faith effort to pay. And I have some clients who are paying me $20 a month on, you know, $3,000-$4,000 bill. But it's okay. You know, it's something.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. But, I mean, my philosophy is that part of the reason, also going back to why I went to law school, I mean, I decided I wanted to do family law because when I was going through my first divorce, I couldn't afford an attorney. And right now, you know, I'm not doing legal aid work all the time, even though I am a member of Volunteer Lawyers, and I do take cases pro bono, and sometimes my cases end up being pro bono, even though I don't intend them to be. But my goal is to provide help. And if that means my salary has to suffer a little bit, then, you know,
It's pretty
I'm
cool.
out there trying. So
That's pretty cool.
don't tell my partners.
I won't tell.
Sometimes I take cases and I mean, when we do new matter memos, the partners have to sign up on them. And one attorney in particular, he'll look at my stuff. Why are you taking this case? Just because, you know. You know, they need help.
And I mean, there's a lot of, I would imagine there's a number of students who feel that way. Was it hard to find a law firm that would be conducive to someone who had that philosophy? I mean, they have to know that you're a bit like that. I mean, it's not.
I don't know if they knew I had that philosophy going in, and I don't know how long they'll put up with me with that philosophy. But on the other hand, so far, I haven't been in the red at the end of the year. So, you know, even though I've had money owing, but I haven't been under budget, if you know what I mean, you know. So, and that's the other thing, they set up a budget each year of the number of hours that you have to bill and the amount of income that you're supposed to bring in as a result of billing those hours. So,
How hard is that to deal with?
it's not easy. You know, I mean, I think our firm probably has some of the lowest required annual hourly in the city, at least people that I've talked to. At the same time, you know, when you're talking about billing 7 to 8 hours a day, that's a lot of work. And you're not working 7 to 8 hours a day to bill 7 to 8. You're working 10 to 12.
How do you do that and have kids? And I mean, we should ask this about to a lot of people.
Yeah.
It seems impossible.
Yeah, it's not easy. I find myself, I'll leave work and go home and spend some time with the kids and then end up going back into the office like 9, 10 o'clock at night. Not too frequently, but I do it. And I don't work as many weekends as I probably should. And my hours aren't what they should be either. You know? But
Is there such thing as balance? We have just, you know, balancing work and home. Is there a balance, or is it just a struggle?
not that I know of. You know, I guess some people manage to, but I don't know.
And how do your kids feel about all of it?
It varies. You know, I got it was funny, I got a Palm Pilot the other day. And you have the little date book. And I hadn't even used it myself, and my youngest son was playing with it in the car. And the next day I go to work and I synchronize it to my desktop. And then when I open my calendar for my desktop for that day, there's all these things to do. And starting at 5 o'clock, it's like take the kids to Sushihama, you know, go bowling with your kids, play Monopoly with your children, you know, walk the dogs. It's like, okay. Yeah, so they feel it, but on the other hand, I try to do things with them. I mean, it's just me, so.
Yeah. How about going through law school with kids? How is that? Do you have any thoughts or advice for people doing that?
The advice that I usually give is, you know, you kind of just find time. As a matter of fact, there's a commissioner on the court here, the Superior Court, who remembers me because we met well, our daughters, well, my daughter and her niece actually were on the same soccer team. And one of the things I used to do was whenever my kids were like at soccer practice or, skating rink for events for the school or something, I'd take my books and I'd study while they're doing their thing. Mm-hmm. And she noticed me reading all the time, and she came up to me and said, "What are you reading? That book looks awfully big." And she saw it was a, legal textbook, and she says, "I thought so." And then we started talking from there. And she always, she remembers me because of that. But you have to work your time out that way, and make sure your children have time. And I think I did all right. I think I did better going through law school than I'm doing now. But then the hours were different also.
What about days when they're sick, or vacation, or plays, or like how do you deal with all that stuff that
with
comes
work
up?
now?
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, because they're old enough now to take care of themselves, it's not as big a deal. But there was a period, probably last year or the year before, where I thought I was going to get fired because I was missing so much time for work. I literally got to work, got out of my car one day. My child called me on a cell phone. Well, the school nurse called me to tell me the child was ill. I had to turn around and go back to work. And, my job is on the east side at Broadway and Craycroft, and school is on the northwest side. So there were those occasions, and then you had the doctor's appointments and all that. I do my best to schedule them either early in the morning or very late in the afternoon. And then, when that time comes, you just have to make up the time. Like I said, working evenings or weekends.
Are they reasonable at work? Do you find?
Yeah. And that's the thing I like about the firm that I work for. It's not one of those firms where nobody's understanding. Most of the attorneys are parents, know what it's like, and they're pretty lenient, I would think. How long they will be, I don't know. I don't plan to push the issue, but
Does it make you nervous? Do you worry about it?
well, for that period last year, I did. But then, when the bottom line came down, like I said, really what they look at, I think, most firms, is the billable hours and the cash receipts. And, I managed to cover that, so it wasn't so bad.
What about getting clients? Is it hard to find clients, or do clients just show up?
So far, I found that they pretty much just show up. The two partners in my department are really good about passing work along. And, I get referrals. People find my name on the internet. So I've been really fortunate in that. I think I average 2, sometimes 3 new clients a week.
That's a lot.
So for someone who's only been doing it for 3 years,
Yeah.
I think that's really good.
Yeah, that is. That really is. Oh, you can totally tell it's the end of the day. I never totally lose it. Sorry.
It's okay.
How much, I'm going to ask a couple more billing things because we've done some billing, but we did so much good stuff. How much, do you get any help if the clients are not, is it all on you to get the clients to pay their
Yes.
bills? That seems really unfair.
Yeah. But actually, that's where my experience as a legal secretary came in handy, because I worked for a managing partner at a large law firm in LA, and I did all his collections. So I've got that experience.
Oh, that's
Not that it's really helped me though.
Any strategies or any thoughts that you could give to students who are just starting out that will be starting out soon on that?
I think the best philosophy is to get as much as you can up front, as much as you feel comfortable with asking for, as much as the client can and is willing to pay, and to accept the fact that some money you just won't see. I know, there are some attorneys in town who are doing it differently, who are not in this town. I went to a seminar, actually, up in Phoenix, and the attorney said they're actually doing collections. I mean, not in-house,
Right,
but
right.
they're going against their clients for money. Most firms that I know of have made a decision not to do that for whatever reason. But if I had to decide, I would probably go against some of them, especially those who have the ability to pay and just aren't.
Do you think that is that sort of more of a trend of law becoming more business than, some people say it's moving more towards just pure business and not sort of an honorable profession, and that honorable profession would not have collected
Okay,
them?
what makes us dishonorable about wanting to get paid? That's the question I have, and I go back to the statement I made earlier. You want to get paid when you go to work,
Okay, I'm going to switch topics a little bit and go back to sort of your law school experience in the sense of sort of what did you find. I've been trying to, this is a hard question, kind of hard question, in terms of sort of your experiences here and your experiences out as practicing. Sort of what do you think we should be doing here? Is it what you got here? Some people say you should just be learning, you know what I mean, like you should be just learning book material, you know what I mean, like the theory. Others say more practice, do more clinics. Others say more on the business side, that you should be learning about have a class that teaches you about billable hours and all those sorts of things. Sort of your thoughts about, if you could.
I think that would be helpful, especially for students who've never worked in the legal field, who have no idea of what that is. And it could be that, I don't even know if we have something called law practice management, law practice management class, where you get into all of those issues, and not necessarily just a class on billable hours, but just
because you had tons,
organization and that sort of thing.
You had tons of experience before you. Do you see your other fellow schoolmates? Do you know what I mean? Like when you got out, it wasn't, you knew what a law firm was like, and it wasn't a shock. But do you think it would have been, or was it for your friends or colleagues coming out? Is there a real need for that because they don't have the knowledge that you did? Or should they just learn it once they get out?
Well, a significant number at least get the experience as summer associates, so I think that covers it a little bit. But it's still nothing like doing it. And even though I had worked in a law firm for all those years, until I actually had to bill hours, and it was important to my life, it's still not the same.
And I know we spent so much time on billable hours, but it's the hot topic.
Yeah.
How do you do them? How do you do your billable hours? Like, do you do them on a computer? Do you write them when like somebody calls you? Do you just start? Do you have like a timer? How do you?
No, we have a computer system, and the computer actually has a timer, but I don't use it. I just time it. I time it myself as I'm going along. Like if I start a project, I note the time when I'm starting and when I'm stopping, and then just enter it into the computer automatically. We just got the computer. Well, we have upgraded a new computer system that was put in within the past year that makes it a lot easier. But there are, attorneys in the office who still handwrite them, some of the older partners who, that's just what they're used to. And they have their secretary input it and put the time for them.
Do you ever forget to put down the time, or does it become, Yeah. And then what do you do then? Do you just try to...
And then I also know I underbill. Because in looking at bills, be it, other attorneys that I work for or bills that I see from other attorneys that I don't work with, like when they have to, provide copies of their billing for purposes of attorney's fees issues. When I'm opening my mail and I read a letter from another attorney on a case, I'll put that down. Some people do. Now, if I do a reply, or if I call the attorney to talk about it, or call a client to talk about it, I'll bill for that. But I don't, bill a client every time I open, read a piece of paper. So I probably could get my billable hours up that way.
How much email do your clients, do you have a lot of email from your clients, or is it just still phone?
Not a lot. It's mostly phones. There are some clients who prefer to email. Realizing that I also have some clients who don't live in Arizona. I have clients I have a client in Hawaii, I have a client in Massachusetts, I have a client in North Carolina, I've had a client in Texas. And that's, to me, the fun part about doing family law, because you get to work with people all over the place. The clients I'll probably never see. But if mother and children or child are here, then generally the case is going to be here. So they do email.
They email?
Yeah. I have a client, I just got a new client who's in the Army stationed in Germany. He emails.
And do you do both sides of divorce, like the mom and the kids, or the...
Yeah.
And it's... are there ever times when you just say, for whatever reason, not interested in dealing with this case? I mean, right when you hear it, you don't take all of the cases that you hear?
Yes. And there are some that I've taken that I wished I hadn't. But, yeah. Sometimes either there's something about the client that they're going to be a difficult client, and I'll say no. Sometimes when I look at the issues, like we got a call from a father who wanted to file an appeal in a case, and he described what had happened, and I was just like, I don't believe in taking people's money unnecessarily. And while I am not the judge, and some people might say, well, you shouldn't make that determination as to whether he'll win or lose, I mean, there are some issues that are pretty straightforward, and I'm not going to tell a person, I'll file something just because, and take their money that way. So I'll say no in cases like that.
All right. What was the hardest moment that you've had so far practicing law?
Probably just learning to deal with difficult clients. I don't know, that's not one moment, but that would be the hardest part, just remembering to keep my cool. This wasn't even my client. I had one case, it was a paternity action, and the mom on the other side, the father and his present wife had described her pretty accurately as someone who used a lot of profanity, who you couldn't talk to easily. And I sent her a letter one day, and she called me and left me a message on the phone and just laid me out. Just like, how am I going to handle this? I had to think about it for a while, and I called her back, and she got on the phone, and she was still a little upset. She's like, what? I said, look, this is Pat Green, okay? You know who I represent. I don't represent you, and whatever your issues are, it's not with me. And, I did my best to calm her down, and I succeeded. And that was one of those cases where I went to my secretary and said, damn, I'm good. But I actually got her to calm down, and by the end of it, got what my client wanted, and she was cool. But that was really difficult, not to want to kind of retaliate, and strike back or be intimidated even. It was difficult even just to not let her intimidate me into not doing anything.
And what have been your happiest moments so far in the law?
When I get really good results from my clients, and clients who have been not able to see their children for no reasonable reason get to see them.
That's pretty good. And if you had to do it all over again, would you do it? Would you go to law school and do what you're doing?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
In a minute.
Do you have anything else? Are we running out of time? I can't even tell the time. Do you have anything else? Any advice you'd like to give the students before we wrap up in terms of anything?
No, I just, just keep in mind your reputation is important.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is. Interestingly, and I'm going to go back to the case of this client that didn't feel I was being aggressive enough. She called me and she made a statement to me that made me feel really good because she had gone around interviewing. She had spoken to 3 or 4 attorneys and trying to find a new attorney. And she said, I want you to know that everyone that I mentioned your name to spoke very highly of you. You should be very proud of your reputation in the community. And it made me feel really bad that I was losing you as an attorney. You know, and I said, oh, good.
That's great.
And, you know, Tucson is a really small town.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the other thing she said, that the other attorney who is overly aggressive, she said they say horrible things about her. And I was just like, oh, wonderful.
That's really good.
So, you know.
And do you feel like, since you've been 3 years out, do you feel like, we hear that it takes about 3 years to feel confident in what you're doing? Do you feel that it took that long? And what should people feel like when those first 3 years? Have you have any advice about that?
Actually, I've been 5 years out. I was 2 years at the Court of Appeals.
Oh, sorry.
And 3 years in real practice.
I'm sorry.
And I don't know. I'm not comfortable yet.
You're not comfortable yet?
No. No, because there's just so much. And, you know, the law is always changing.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's the fun part about it, because it's always new. You know, even though there are some things you can rely on and, you know when you go read something that's what it is, but you have to go read to make sure it's still that way.
Okay, one more question. We're way over the happy question's usually the last question, but
Okay.
well, just one more. When you were in school, did you take just how did you know, since you knew you wanted
Yes.
to go into family law, so
Mhm.
did you take mostly what did you do?
There was only one class called family law. I made sure I took that. But the thing about family law is you get so many issues, and, for example, tax. I did not want to take tax, okay? And Dr. Jordan Curtis looked at me, she said, you're going to do family law, you have to take tax. It was the best decision I've ever made. Not to mention the fact that I got a good grade, so that helped a lot. But, in doing domestic relations, there's real estate issues, there's pension, there's tax, there's, of course, the usual children and who gets the dog, but there's just everything.
So did you just try to figure out all the different things that would relate to?
Mm-hmm. We take what's required for the bar, of course, and
Right.
what the school requires, but then from there,
Yeah.
just anything that I thought might come up.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else? No?
Well, since I mentioned all those other issues, though, the thing that I think students, and then when you start practicing, need to keep in mind is that if you get an issue, though, that is over your head, that you need to consult someone else. In our firm, we're fortunate, we have attorneys in the real estate department. We have business lawyers, have tax lawyers, have trust and estate lawyers, and whenever I have a problem in those areas, I go talk to them. And if it's something that, even after talking to them, I don't feel comfortable with, I refer the client to them, or if I need to refer them someplace else. For example, I have a client right now whose former husband filed bankruptcy in California. Well, you need to go find yourself a California bankruptcy attorney. And it's something that, especially if you're doing domestic, those issues come up, and you need to remember to always refer cases if it's not something you can handle.
And how do they find who to refer to? Do people at your law firm help you figure out?
Yes. Our firm is a member of an organization of firms that we use specifically as a referral list. We're not limited to using them now. And just kind of by word of mouth. I mean, I refer people to my classmates. My classmates refer people to me. So just people you know and meet.
That's very good. That's good advice.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.